Seattle never forgets to rain. On most mornings, the light over Lake Union looked like it was reconsidering its own existence, muted, gentle, never quite sure if it wanted to be day. Emily Carter loved that kind of indecision. It matched the way she spoke calm, certain only when it mattered. At 26, she had already sold more penthouses than most of her colleagues twice her age. She wore beige suits, low heels, and the kind of perfume that lingered like a memory rather than a statement. Clients trusted her. Men adored her quiet authority, and women envied how easily she seemed to belong anywhere. At home, Ethan Brooks was making coffee, his way of showing love when words felt too heavy. He was 30, tall, the kind of handsome that ages too quickly. Once ambition gets involved, they had been married for 2 years, and for a while, everything worked. Their apartment on Capitol Hill had floor-to-ceiling windows, 2 espresso cups always waiting, and a silence that used to feel comfortable, but lately, silence had changed texture. It no longer rested, it accused. Emily noticed first in small ways the way Ethan's phone faced down, the way his laughter sounded like it was shared with someone else before reaching her. He had joined a new real estate investment firm downtown, led by Veronica Hale, a name that came with the kind of weight money buys when it wants respect. Veronica was 52, divorced twice, beautiful in a sculpted, deliberate way. She moved through offices like gravity was optional. When she spoke, people rearranged their priorities to match hers. The first time Emily met her was at a company dinner. Veronica extended a hand, cold diamonds against warm skin, and said, "You must be the reason Ethan still smiles." It was a compliment that sounded rehearsed. Emily smiled back anyway, but inside, something tightened. Over the following months, gifts began to appear, first for Ethan, then for them. A new watch from the team, a wine subscription as appreciation, a sleek car he insisted was on loan. Emily told herself it was business. She'd seen power dynamics before, but the line between gratitude and grooming is drawn in invisible ink. One evening, when she returned home early from a client showing, Ethan wasn't there. His text said working late, presentation tomorrow. She believed him, then noticed the scent on his pillow wasn't hers. It smelled expensive, unfamiliar, like someone who'd never had to check a price tag. That night, she sat by the window watching the rain trace patterns down the glass. Seattle looked like it was crying quietly for other people's sins. She remembered what her mother used to say. A woman doesn't lose her husband in one night. She loses him in the pauses between sentences. Emily began counting the pauses. Veronica knew how to read hunger. She had built her empire feeding it hunger for success, attention, validation. Ethan was easy ambitious, eager to impress, and young enough to mistake admiration for opportunity. In the beginning, she played mentor. Late-night strategy calls turned into dinner invitations. "You need someone to believe in you," she told him one evening, pouring wine. He wanted to believe that too. By the time Ethan realized the line had blurred, it was already too late to redraw it. The affair wasn't born out of passion. It was born out of exhaustion. He was tired of feeling small. Veronica made him feel inevitable. Back home, Emily noticed how his touch grew careful, as if guilt could be disguised as tenderness. She watched him undress in the half-light, his body turned slightly away, and wondered when love had become choreography. She didn't cry. She observed. In the mornings, she put on her lipstick, checked her reflection, and smiled with precision. If he was going to lie, she would make sure he lied to the best version of her. Martha Brooks moved in shortly after Ethan's father passed. She was the kind of mother who measured affection in dollars saved and dinners cooked. To her, Emily's independence was both admirable and threatening. "Men like Ethan need to feel needed," she said once, stirring soup that no one asked for. Emily replied, "Then maybe he should learn what he's needed for." Martha didn't appreciate philosophy at breakfast. She did, however, noticed the new car keys on the counter and smiled approvingly. Finally, someone's recognizing his potential, she said. Emily's spoon froze midair. Later that week, Martha invited Veronica to dinner without telling Emily. When the elevator opened and Veronica stepped out with a bottle of vintage champagne, Emily felt the temperature in the room drop. Veronica smiled like she owned the building. Ethan introduced them again, too quickly, his voice a shade higher. The meal was polite theater. Veronica complimented the decor. Martha complimented Veronica's jewelry. Emily complimented the wine, because silence would have been a surrender. After Veronica left, Martha said, "That woman could make Ethan's career. Don't ruin it with jealousy, dear." Emily stared at her mother-in-law for a long second, then simply said, "I'm not jealous. I'm disappointed." Weeks passed. Ethan became a stranger who shared her address. Veronica became a rumor wearing perfume. One Sunday, Emily visited her office alone. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and searched for Veronica Hale. Articles, interviews, charity galas, each photo showed the same calculated smile. One image made her pause a press release of the company's leadership retreat in Napa Valley. In the background, barely visible, Ethan's reflection on a glass door holding a wine glass, laughing. She closed the laptop gently, as if any sudden movement would make the truth louder. That night, when Ethan came home, she asked a simple question. How was Napa? He froze just long enough to answer wrong. I told you it was a local workshop. She smiled. Right. Must have been very educational. He didn't ask what she meant. Guilt has selective hearing. They went to bed back to back. Outside, the rain began again, tapping softly like someone knocking on the edge of a conscience. One afternoon, at a cafe near Pike Place Market, Emily's colleague leaned in and whispered, I saw Ethan's boss at the Four Seasons last weekend. Guess who was with her? Emily didn't flinch. Guess. The colleague hesitated. You already know, don't you? Emily sipped her coffee, bitter and steady. Knowing and accepting are two different things. She stood, paid the bill, and left a tip large enough to end the conversation. That evening, she opened a new notebook, her habit when she needed clarity. On the first page, she wrote, If you must lose something, let it not be your dignity. The pen paused. She looked toward the living room where Ethan's laughter echoed faintly through a phone call. Her heart ached, but not from betrayal, from recognition. She was watching the man she loved become the man she couldn't respect. In every marriage, there's a moment when one person stops believing. The other will come home different. For Emily, that moment arrived quietly, between two raindrops. She closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and whispered into the dark. Don't make me choose between love and self-respect. You'll lose. And somewhere across town, in a hotel suite that smelled of new money and old mistakes, Ethan promised Veronica the same thing he once promised his wife. This doesn't change who I am, but of course, it already had. Morning broke gray and unfinished. Seattle has a way of pretending the sun might appear, only to change its mind halfway through the sky. Emily woke before Ethan. She watched him sleep, peaceful, unburdened, like someone who hadn't yet met the consequences waiting for him. She had stopped crying weeks ago. Tears were for confusion. Silence was for preparation. The confrontation came the way storms do, suddenly, but not without warning. It was a Friday evening. Emily had followed, a hunch, to Veronica's private townhouse near the marina. She told herself she was only driving by. But when Ethan's car appeared in the driveway, any illusion of self-control dissolved. She parked 2 blocks away, waited. The minutes stretched. taut as violin strings. Then, laughter Veronica's spilled into the night. The door opened. The two of them stepped out, casual, intimate, the kind of closeness that comes from practiced secrecy. Emily walked forward before she could stop herself. Ethan. He turned, the color draining from his face faster than from the sky. Emily, what are you doing here? Veronica stood still, hand resting lightly on his arm, a smirk that had survived better scandals. Emily's voice was calm, terrifyingly so. You should ask yourself that question. For a second, no one breathed. Then, words exploded: anger, denial, fragments of dignity clawing for air. You don't understand. Ethan began. I understand perfectly, she said. You traded loyalty for opportunity. Congratulations. You finally closed the biggest deal of your career. Her hand trembled, but she didn't let them see it. Veronica tried diplomacy. Emily, relationships are complicated. Sometimes people outgrow each other. Emily laughed once, sharp. You mean when one grows rich enough to buy the other's husband? Neighbors were watching now. Headlights slowed. The moment became a spectacle. Ethan stepped forward, pleading, please, let's talk at home. Home, she repeated, eyes glassy. You mean the place I paid for while you rehearsed this betrayal? She walked away before the rage could turn into something uglier. The night air bit her cheeks, cleansing and cruel. Back home, she waited for him to return. He came hours later, face pale, tie loose, voice heavy with remorse. I made a mistake, he said. It meant nothing. I'll quit. I'll fix this. Emily listened, motionless. Mistakes, she said finally, are accidents. You scheduled yours. Still, when he knelt and begged, when he promised to cut ties and start over, something in her, the part that still remembered their first kiss under a streetlight, hesitated. She agreed to give him one last chance, but under one condition. Leave the company. Prove that you can walk away. He swore he would. For a week, he acted like the man she once knew. Flowers on the counter, dinner at home, silence without tension. Then one afternoon, his phone buzzed while he was in the shower. A message flashed across the screen. Meeting at the usual time. Don't be late. V. Emily stared at it until the letters blurred. She didn't confront him that night. Instead, she forwarded the message to herself and began collecting proof, the currency of closure. Martha, however, noticed everything but the truth. Men need patience, she said, folding laundry that wasn't hers. You can't punish ambition. Is that what we're calling adultery now? Emily replied. The older woman sniffed. Veronica is powerful. If she helps him rise, we all benefit. We, Emily repeated, or just you. The line between family and self-interest was thinner than Emily had ever realized. When the evidence became undeniable, photos from a friend who worked near Veronica's office, screenshots of calls, Emily turned to the only person who could still shake Ethan's world, his mother. She invited Martha for coffee, slid the phone across the table. I'm done protecting him. Maybe you'll believe your eyes. Martha gasped, scandalized less by the betrayal than by the potential gossip. That woman thinks she can steal my son. I'll handle this. Emily almost warned her not to, but sometimes chaos does the work. Conscience can't. 2 days later, chaos arrived wearing a floral scarf. Martha stormed into the firm's glass lobby, shouting Veronica's name. Employees froze. Phones recorded. You think you can ruin families and walk free? She screamed. You're old enough to be his mother. Veronica descended the staircase like a queen, amused by rebellion. Mrs. Brooks, she said coolly. If your family values were stronger, perhaps your son wouldn't have looked elsewhere. Gasps, whispers, the sound of careers combusting. Ethan rushed out, mortified. Mom, please. But Martha was unstoppable. She bought you like furniture, and you let her sit on your soul. Security escorted her out. Cameras caught every word. By the evening, the clip had found its way online. Veronica retaliated, the only way people like her know how, by issuing an ultimatum. She called Ethan into her office. This scandal could ruin me, she said, but it can also be contained. Divorce your wife, distance yourself publicly, and I'll promote you. I can make you rich enough to buy silence. He stared at the window. The city reflected like temptation itself. What if I say no? Then you lose everything you've borrowed from my name. When he returned home that night, Emily looked up from her laptop. You chose, she said before he spoke. He didn't deny it. I can't go back to nothing, then go forward to nothing, she whispered. He packed in silence. The fire came later, literal and emotional, when Martha discovered Emily had burned the suitcase containing $500,000 she'd hidden. In the bedroom wall safe money meant to secure Ethan's future. She screamed until her throat broke. You destroyed my savings. Emily's voice was calm. No. I destroyed the illusion that you could buy respect. That night, mother and son left together, exiled from both conscience and comfort. Veronica welcomed them briefly, charity disguised as dominance. She housed Martha in the guest quarters, treated her like help, and reminded her daily that gratitude has chores attached. Ethan, once promising, became an accessory, a kept man with a fading shine. Emily, meanwhile, moved through the aftermath with the precision of someone learning to breathe again. She sold their apartment, bought a smaller place by the lake, and went back to work. Clients still asked about her husband. She smiled and said, "He's pursuing new opportunities." No one needed to know what he was losing to find them. At night, she wrote in her journal, "Forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about letting yourself out." The pen stopped. She looked out at the rain, steady, rhythmic, like a metronome guiding her heartbeat back to pace. Somewhere across town, in Veronica's mansion of mirrors, Ethan poured whiskey he couldn't taste. Veronica was on the phone, voice honeyed with control. "Daniel, darling, don't forget the dinner tomorrow. I want you to meet someone interesting." Ethan didn't ask who. He already knew what it felt like to be the introduction that ruins the evening. Autumn in Seattle does not change color. It changes temperature. The rain turns colder, the wind meaner, and people begin walking faster, as if speed could make distance between them and their regrets. For Ethan, that distance had already become a full-time job. Living with Veronica meant waking up in a world that rewarded compliance and punished reflection. He told himself it was temporary, a step toward stability. But stability built on deceit is like building a house on fog. You can live in it, but you'll never sleep well. Veronica was never cruel, just calculating. She praised him when it benefited her, dismissed him when she was tired. Her affection was performance art, a gift she gave herself in front of others. When clients visited, she introduced him as my trusted partner. When the doors closed, she called him the boy who couldn't afford himself. Martha watched from the margins. At first, she defended Veronica, grateful for the roof and the illusion of status. But gratitude curdles when respect is absent. She ironed Veronica's dresses, served wine to her guests, and heard laughter echo from rooms where she wasn't allowed to sit. Each evening, she told herself, it's still better than being poor. But each morning, the mirror disagreed. Emily, meanwhile, was rebuilding. The workday had structure, the nights had peace, and for the first time in years, silence did not hurt. Clients described her as poised, efficient, almost luminous. Pain, when processed properly, becomes charisma. One afternoon, during a property tour of a new waterfront condominium, she met Daniel Hale, 25. articulate, with the kind of confidence that came from not needing to prove anything. He was there to buy a penthouse for investment, but what he seemed to invest in was conversation. They talked about the city, about music, about what ambition costs. When she mentioned her past briefly, he didn't ask for details. He just said, "Sometimes the wrong love teaches us the right kind of solitude." She smiled. "That sounds rehearsed." He shrugged. "I rehearse honesty. It's rarer than people think." They began meeting again at first by coincidence, then by choice. Daniel had an ease that felt like oxygen after years of smoke. He never asked her to smile, never promised to fix her. He simply saw her without demanding proof of her worth. Months passed. The city shifted into winter. Emily's laughter returned slowly, like sunlight leaking through broken blinds. When Daniel invited her to a dinner with his family, she hesitated. "I'm not good at families," she said. He grinned. "Neither am I. You'll fit right in." She agreed. It felt harmless, a polite evening. Nothing more. Life, however, has a sense of humor or The restaurant was the kind of place where success went to dine with its reflection. Glass walls, golden light, waiters who moved like choreography. Daniel arrived first, greeting her with genuine warmth. "You look beautiful," he said simply, as if complimenting the weather. When the hostess led them to the private table, Emily's steps slowed. Across the room, standing near the bar, was Veronica Hale. Her voice reached first sharp, familiar, and beside her, half turned, was Ethan. For a heartbeat, Emily thought it was a hallucination, the universe recycling its villains. Then Daniel waved toward them. "Mom, this is Emily Carter." The world tilted. The name dropped like glass. Veronica froze mid-smile. Ethan's hand tightened around his glass until it nearly cracked. Emily's breath caught, but her face remained serene. Years of sales meetings had trained her to perform composure. "Good evening," she said, voice smooth. "Pleasure to meet you again." Daniel frowned, glancing between them. "You two know each other?" Veronica recovered first. "Seattle is a small city." "Small enough," Emily murmured. "Some people keep running in circles." Dinner became theater. The waiter poured wine no one tasted. Ethan avoided her eyes. Veronica's charm malfunctioned. Daniel tried to bridge the silence, unaware he was stitching together ghosts. "So, Emily," he said, "my mother mentioned she once worked with your ex-husband." Veronica's fork clinked against the plate. Emily met her gaze. Yes, he was one of her projects. Veronica's lips tightened. "That's an unfair description." Emily smiled faintly. "Accuracy often is." Halfway through the meal, Martha appeared. Veronica had brought her as silent support, perhaps as proof of generosity. When she saw Emily, the color drained from her face. The old woman stammered, "You here?" Emily's tone was calm. "Good to see you, Mrs. Brooks." Still serving the same mistress. Daniel blinked. "You two know each other too." The room shrank. Even the candles seemed to hold their breath. Veronica tried to regain control. "Daniel, enough surprises for tonight. Emily and I have history." Emily interrupted softly. "Your history is sitting beside you." Her eyes flicked toward Ethan. Daniel followed the look, realization dawning like thunder. He pushed his chair back. "You." Ethan's voice cracked. "Daniel." It's not what Daniel stood. Don't finish that sentence. Every liar starts it the same way. He turned to Emily. Pain and apology fighting for space on his face. "You didn't know." She shook her head. "If I had, I would have stayed home." Veronica reached for him. "Daniel, please, don't make a scene." He laughed bitterly. "You made the scene. Mom, I'm just noticing the set." The restaurant had gone quiet. People pretended not to stare. Daniel's voice softened when he faced Emily again. "Let's go." She hesitated. "This is your family," he said. "Then consider this my emancipation." They left together, stepping into the cold night, where the air finally felt honest. Back inside, the empire began to crack. Veronica sat motionless, pride bleeding beneath her perfume. Ethan reached for her hand. She withdrew it. "Get out," she said, voice flat. "Both of you, you and your mother." Martha began to plead. "Veronica, I save it." Veronica snapped. "I don't reward incompetence or drama." By midnight, they were gone bags, silence, and humiliation in tow. Daniel didn't call Emily for days. She didn't blame him. Sometimes pain needs distance to settle into meaning. When he finally appeared at her office, he looked older by a year. "I'm leaving for New York," he said. "I need to start over somewhere that doesn't echo." She nodded. "That's brave." He smiled sadly. It's necessary. He hesitated, then added, You deserve peace, Emily, not pity, not someone's leftover apologies. She replied quietly, So do you. They stood in silence, two people recognizing the beauty in an ending done right. He reached out, touched her hand once, and said, If I ever find my way back to Seattle, I hope you're still building something. She said, By then, I will be the building. He laughed softly, and for the first time in months, the sound didn't hurt. Across town, Ethan returned to the modest apartment they once shared. The furniture was gone, the walls freshly painted, the scent of her perfume erased. He stood in the empty space, realizing that silence, once shared, now mocked him alone. He picked up his phone, scrolled through old photos, and deleted them one by one. It didn't help. Memory doesn't have a recycle bin. Martha, exhausted and regretful, tried to apologize. We only wanted the best for you. Ethan looked at her, eyes hollow. Then why does it feel like you buried me alive that night? Mother and son ate soup in silence. For the first time, neither pretended it tasted like comfort.
Ramadan.
Winter returned like an old apology, too late, too quiet. Seattle had learned to live without color. Everything was gray, even the light. For Emily, gray had become a kind of peace. It asked nothing, promised nothing, judged nothing. She spent her mornings by the window, coffee in hand, watching fog roll over the water like breath from a sleeping city. The apartment was small, but it was hers bought by her own commissions, her own hours, her own scars. People often said she seemed strong. Strength, she thought, was just the name people gave to women who had run out of options. Work filled the days. Clients came and went, the way tides do, demanding, retreating, always returning. Her phone buzzed constantly, yet her heart remained still. Once, she saw Veronica's face flash on a business article headline, Real estate magnate steps down amid scandal. The subtext was merciless allegations, internal betrayal, investigation. Emily didn't read the full story. Closure She had learned doesn't need details. Some nights, though, she wondered what silence sounded like in Veronica's mansion now that ambition had left. She pictured the grand hall empty, wine glasses collecting dust, and a woman realizing too late that control is a lonely god. Martha visited her unexpectedly one afternoon. The older woman looked smaller, her pride washed out by regret. "I didn't come for forgiveness," she said, clutching her coat. "I came because I don't know where else to go." Emily made tea. They sat across from each other, the air heavy with old ghosts. Martha's voice cracked. "You were good to him, better than he deserved. I was blind." Emily looked into her cup, steam blurring the line between mercy and memory. "Blindness isn't the worst sin," she said softly. "Refusing to see after the light returns, that's worse." Tears slid down Martha's face. "He's trying. You know, Ethan. He got a job at a small firm. No handouts this time." Emily nodded but didn't answer. She wasn't interested in redemption measured by employment. Martha reached across the table, tentative. "You're stronger than I ever was." Emily smiled faintly. "No, I just broke differently." When the older woman left, Emily stood by the window again, watching the rain begin. It no longer looked like sorrow. It looked like cleansing. Ethan showed up weeks later. No warning, no excuses, just a knock on her door. She hesitated before opening it. Some memories arrive dressed as closure, others as relapse. He looked thinner, older. His suit didn't fit quite right, as if success had stopped tailoring itself to him. "I just wanted to see how you're doing," he said. Emily studied him for a long moment. "You could have asked that before you broke it," he smiled weakly. "I know. I've been thinking about everything, about how fast I traded what mattered." She folded her arms. "Regret is easy after the bill arrives." He took a breath. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm sorry. For a long time." She said nothing. "Then I already forgave you, Ethan, just not for you, for me. I couldn't carry your mistakes forever." He blinked, surprised. "Then why does it still hurt?" "Because pain leaves slowly," she said, "like rent in a place you once called home." He nodded, defeated but lighter. Before leaving, he asked quietly, "Are you happy?" She thought for a moment. Happiness isn't the goal. Peace is. He looked down. "I hope you find both." She smiled. "I already did. One taught me to live, the other taught me to leave." Veronica's world collapsed quietly after the scandal. Investors withdrew, friends disappeared, and the empire she'd built on seduction and control crumbled. Daniel's absence hurt her most. He had refused every call. She sat in her glass penthouse. The city spread beneath her like a kingdom gone mute, and realized the cruelest punishment wasn't loss. It was solitude without dignity, in a rare moment of clarity. She wrote a letter to Emily. We were both foolish women in our own ways. I mistook power for love, and you mistook loyalty for salvation. Maybe we were never enemies, just mirrors reflecting what the other feared. Take care of what's left of him, or don't. Take care of yourself. That's harder. Emily never replied. Some words are meant to be read, not returned. Spring arrived shyly, as if asking permission to exist again. Cherry blossoms lined the streets near the lake. Emily walked every morning, listening to the world thaw. She had started mentoring young agents at her firm, teaching them negotiation, but more importantly, self-respect. Success without peace, she told them, is just a prettier form of failure. Her laughter returned easily now, unburdened by memory. The mirror, once her harshest critic, had become her quietest friend. One afternoon, as she prepared documents for a client, a familiar email name appeared. Daniel Hale, subject line, hello from New York. She hesitated, then opened it. Seattle must be blooming again. I still think of that night, the dinner, the silence, how you carried yourself through it all. I've learned that forgiveness is not about returning. It's about remembering without bitterness. If you ever visit New York, there's coffee waiting on a quiet street that doesn't know our past. Be well, Daniel. She read it twice, smiled once, and replied with 3 words. Thank you, Daniel. No promises, no maybes, just peace written in lowercase. That evening, Emily stood on the balcony, the city alive beneath her. Rain began to fall again, soft, forgiving, endless. She whispered to herself, everything I lost taught me what I deserved. Her phone buzzed with another email notification, but she didn't check. Some endings don't need witnesses. Across town, Ethan closed the office late, locking the door behind him. He took the bus home, carrying a briefcase filled with unpaid bills and quiet intentions. At a red light, he saw a woman in a beige coat crossing the street, confident, alone, untouchable. For a second, his heart tightened. Then the light turned green. He didn't look back again. Veronica sold her mansion and moved to a smaller place by the coast. Occasionally, she sent money anonymously to women's shelters. No press releases, No applause, just a private form of penance. Loneliness, she discovered, could also be used for good if you let it humble you. Martha lived with her sister in Portland. She tended a small garden and kept a framed photo of Ethan and Emily taken years ago, before the noise. When visitors asked about it, she said, "That's my son and the woman he didn't deserve." Years later, on a warm evening, Emily hosted a charity event for single mothers and domestic abuse survivors. When the photographer asked for her quote for the local paper, she said, "I don't believe in revenge. I believe in transformation. What we survive isn't what defines us. How we use it does." Her words became the headline the next day. But headlines fade, stories stay. That night, she returned home to her quiet apartment, slipped off her heels, and poured a glass of red wine. Outside, the lake shimmered beneath a rare, forgiving moon. She leaned against the window and whispered not to anyone, but to the version of herself that had once begged for love. "You made it. You didn't need to win them back. You only needed to win yourself." The city exhaled, and in the rhythm of rain against glass, life went on, not perfect, not painless, but finally, peacefully hers. Desire is not the enemy. It's the mirror that shows what we worship. Some worship wealth, some worship validation. A few, the lucky few, learn to worship peace. Emily learned that the true luxury isn't what money buys. It's walking away without bitterness, closing the door without needing applause, and sleeping soundly knowing your soul is no longer collateral, because dignity is the only currency that never loses its value. End of The Price of Desire. Complete radio script. Calm Mind Journal.